Hey everybody, it's the Van Show! Welcome, welcome, welcome! Today we've got our guest, James Riley. Can you say hi to everybody?
Hello!
Hello! Now, we would like to know a little bit about you. So first of all, can you tell us where you're from?
I'm from Washington, D.C.
And do you love Washington, D.C.?
Washington, D.C. is beautiful. It's got monuments, it's got like Greek buildings with columns and stuff, and it's where everything happens. It's amazing, and it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. You should definitely come visit.
Do you have any pets?
I have 3 cats. They all help me write in various ways by standing on my keyboard. One is named Zoe, she's a black cat. One is named Izzy, she's a very chubby gray cat. And then one is named Templeton, and he kind of looks like a cow.
And do they ever make it into your stories?
They didn't, but in Once Upon Another Time, there's a giant cat named Rufus who can talk. He has a magic hat that lets him talk. But otherwise, he's a normal cat, so anytime there's danger, he just takes off and runs. So yeah, he's an older cat that I used to have, and unfortunately, he's now only in the book.
Oh, so it is based on a real life cat?
Yes.
Oh man, you know, I had a friend like that. I had him for 16 years. His name was Bougie.
Aw.
The greatest cat ever. Oh,
Yeah.
you know, he still lives in my heart.
Yes.
And I got a bunch of pictures of him. And you have the extra bonus of you got to put him in a book.
Yes, he's gonna live forever in that book, and I get to write about him every day, so it's amazing.
Since you are a writer, I'd like to ask, so how long ago did you start writing?
I've been writing since I was around 8, but I didn't show anyone. I was always just writing stories that I had in my head, and they didn't feel real until I put them down on paper. Because when they're in your head, you can always still change them and mess with them, and they can turn into completely different stories. But once you write them down, they're kind of like, they're done and they're set. So I would write down the stories that I had in my head, but it was just for fun. I didn't want to actually show them to anybody. So it took me until I was in college where I had a professor who was like, maybe you should try showing them to someone. That's sometimes the point of writing stories, to share them and to have other people read. And so that's when I first wrote Half Upon a Time.
Oh, wow. So like you're right out of the gate, the first thing you wrote for other people to read was a book that got published?
No.
Oh.
The very first book I wrote.
Magical story.
That would have been amazing, and it didn't happen. The very first book I wrote was not very good, but I learned so much, and that's a great way to learn, is by trying, seeing how it goes, making mistakes, and it's okay because that's how we learn. The more you practice, and the more you if you want to be a writer, the more you write and read, you get better at it so quickly. So the best way to learn for me was to write a really bad book. So I tried to stop from there.
And as you were writing that, did you, I know something that I know stops a lot of people from even writing that first book is that fear that, oh, no one's going to like this book. Why should I even write it? Did you have that in the back of your head? But I mean, you soldiered through anyway, so something made you finish that book. But was that a fear of yours while you were writing that first book?
That's still a fear of mine. I've written something like 16 books now, and every time I'm like, is anyone going to want to read this? Is it any good? And whenever I talk to kids, that comes up. And I always try to tell them, it's okay for it to not be very good when you're first starting out. It's okay when you're starting a new book for it not to be very good. That's what we call a first draft. It's just all about getting to the very end, because then you complete the book, you give yourself a lot of credit, because that was amazing what you just did. And then you can go back and you can edit it and revise it until you're happy with it. So that's just part of the process. None of us like the first draft when it comes out, but it's all about building a foundation, and then you build this big, beautiful house from there.
That's awesome. That's very inspiring. I do want to ask, though, because it seems like the most challenging part of this would be to finish that first book, realize this isn't going to get published. The hard part would be then starting that second book. Do you remember that moment, or what made you push through to get that second book written?
Yeah, it definitely was hard. I had spent a year writing that very first book, and to know that no one was going to read it, and it was okay because I knew it wasn't really that good. But the thing that got me through that was thinking, I didn't waste that time. I learned so much from writing that. I learned how, hopefully, to not make the same mistakes. I learned all about the process because that was the first time I'd ever done it. So the next time it was easier, it went a little quicker, and each subsequent book has gone quicker than that. So it was really, it was so worthwhile, even though at the time it was so sad that no one was gonna read it. It really did help. So that's what I try to remember. Anytime you're practicing and doing something that you love, it's gonna help you get better at it.
It seems like you write a lot about magic and legends. What is it that got you interested in those as subjects?
I read a lot of fantasy growing up, but the thing that I love about magic is that anything can happen. It's like taking our imaginations and making them real. And that's kind of what I'm doing in writing. So that's like the closest I get to magic. But I love that idea. That's why I love fairy tales so much. It's like magic is happening outside your door. You can walk outside and you're selling your cow to get magic beans. And that's just like a completely normal thing. I would love to live in that world. I would probably buy too many magic beans, but still. So I just love the idea that anything can happen, because it's so much about like our daydreaming and our imagination. It's like that come to life.
And a lot of stuff does happen because you've written a bunch of books. Can you tell us about this newest one?
Yes. So like I said, my first series was actually about fairy tales. It was called Half Upon a Time. This is a sequel series, so you don't have to have read the first one. This one takes place like 12 years in the future, so some of the same characters show up, but you don't need to have known. This one is about, I take all the fairy tales that I love and that everyone kind of knows, and I play with them and I twist them a little bit so that they'll still be surprising. So this is the story of Thumbelina. Her name is Lena, but instead of being like a 5-inch tall human girl, she's a 5.5-foot tall giant girl. So, because I wanted to write about giants, because my first series had all these giants in them, but they were the bad guys. So I wanted to look at it from their perspective this time. But if you're gonna write about giants and normal-sized people, the normal-sized people might get squished. So you wanna kind of be careful with that. I made her a little shorter, like human size, but that means like her own people don't really accept who she is because she doesn't look like them. So she has to, her parents want her to hide how she looks, and she doesn't want that. She's really proud of being a giant. So she wants to just be accepted for who she is and like her inner giant strength. So it's about coming to terms with that, and a lot of fun fairy tales all smushed together.
That's such a great take on that concept. I love that. Like, because I mean, most giant stories, like if there's a non-giant or a non big thing, it's an outsider coming into their group. I've never heard of a story where it was it was a giant in and of themselves that was kind of the outcast of the giant group. Yes. Super cool, man. Yeah, I can't wait to read it. So hey, do you want to play a game with me? All right. Now, we like to play Truth or Dare on the Van Show. And so I'd like to I'd like to posit you with this choice. Truth or dare? Truth. All right. Let's see. Truth. Let me look at my notes. Hold on. Ah, yes. All right. For truth, I want to ask you, what scares you the most?
So many things. As someone with a very overactive imagination, if I watch a horror movie, I am staying up late for the next week. I can't, anytime I look in a dark room, all I see are the monsters from the horror movie. It comes from having just too much imagination, which is both a blessing and a curse. I love being able to think about anything, but the moment I don't want to think about something, my brain goes, hello, do you remember this? It was terrifying, wasn't it? Why don't we explore that while you're trying to fall asleep? So definitely anything horror is terrifying, which is good because that's what it's supposed to be. And it does its job well.
Well, and I imagine that's why you don't write horror books.
Yes. Oh, I could never do that. I am Stephen King. I don't know how he sleeps.
Maybe he doesn't.
Probably doesn't.
Well, awesome. James, thank you so much for coming on the show with us.
Thank you for having me.
This has been great.
Oh, always.
All right.
Nice.
Okay, now I'll count to 3 and then we'll do this. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Goodbye! Bye.